In the 21st century, we can visit places that our grandparents probably didn't even know existed. Intercontinental travel has been cut down so much that you can get from one side of the planet to the opposite side after just over 24 hours. However, there are some places that you are prohibited from entering entirely. You've likely heard of Area 51, North Sentinel Island in Chernobyl, but in this video we wanted to uncover some of the slightly more obscure places you probably didn't know you weren't allowed to go to. This first one will only be applicable to half of you, but there's a mountain in Greece that is completely off-limits to women. Mount Athos in the northeast of the nation has an autonomous status that sets it apart from the rest of the country. The law prohibiting the visiting of women to the mountain is a practice that has existed for over 1,000 years, dating back to when modern-day Greece was part of the Eastern Roman Empire, and is related to the religious nature of the land. The mountain and surrounding peninsula is ran by Greek Orthodox monks. These monks have taken a vow of celibacy for life, and women are seen as a distraction to their spiritual devotion. The mountain of Mount Athos itself is seen as a dedication to the Virgin Mary, and therefore Mary is the only woman who is allowed to be on the island. Male tourists are permitted though, albeit at restricted rates in specific time frames, so half of you watching this may consider giving this place a visit at some point in your life. Whilst we could have made a point about Chernobyl in this video, a slightly more obscure village in Australia is similarly dangerous and off-limits for the safety of civilians. Wittenoom in Western Australia is toxic not due to nuclear radioactivity, but for something infamous in causing respiratory diseases. In the 1930s, mining for Rebecite began in the area, and the town was thus settled by miners and their families. Rebecite has many uses and was even as far back as ancient Rome, due to its amazing strength, flame retardant, and in particular, insulating properties. Unfortunately though, this Rebecite goes by another name, blue asbestos. Decades after mining in the area began, it gradually became widely known how dangerous and potentially fatal asbestos was when its fibers got into the lungs of people simply breathing in the air in this small town of just a few thousand people. Asbestos was particularly known for causing mesothelioma, an aggressive and often fatal cancer that begins in the lungs. In subsequent years, asbestos was banned by various nations worldwide despite its impressive properties, and this tiny town of Wittenoom sadly had 2,000 former residents die from mesothelioma. The town was abandoned and the only road to it completely sealed off, making accessibility near impossible and extremely dangerous if you ever attempted to visit. Whilst North Sentinel Island is pretty well known at this point for being a remote island full of an uncontacted tribe that the Indian government has banned anyone from visiting, Brazil has a slightly less well-known island of their own that is similarly off-limits, although it isn't people that occupies it. The residents of Snake Island is Brazil is full. You'd never guess, snakes? The island is just under half of a square kilometer in size and isn't as diverse as you may expect. Whilst there are 4,000 different snake species across the globe, Snake Island is home to 4,000 snakes of really only one species, the golden lancehead pit viper. These vipers are endemic to the island, meaning that if you went anywhere else on the planet, you wouldn't be able to find them in the wild. The snakes themselves are extremely venomous and are one of the most dangerous snakes one could possibly encounter in the wild. The prohibition of visiting the island isn't only to protect you though, it's also to protect them. Given the very small land mass of their entire geographical distribution, as well as the less frequent visiting of birds as prey to the islands on account of the Amazon's increasing deforestation, the snakes are currently critically endangered. Their isolation has also led to even more fascinating undesirable activities, including cannibalism due to a lack of food sources, and brace yourself for this, inbreeding. This causes infertility issues amongst the offspring, which poses yet another threat to the species sustaining their existence. Regardless, this is somewhere the Brazilian government strictly bans you from visiting. These are far from being obscure places, but there's a lot of misconceptions over what is actually permissible with the two holiest sites in Islam. In Mecca, it is true that if you aren't a Muslim, you will be completely prohibited from entering the city. There are checkpoints on the highway to Islam's holiest site, and if the Saudi guards suspect you of being non-Muslim, perhaps by making you recite the Shahada or a basic test of your Islamic knowledge, you will be turned away. As you can imagine, this strategy can't be 100% foolproof, and as recently as 2022 a Saudi man was arrested for helping an Israeli journalist enter the city, with Israelis themselves having only been allowed in the nation of Saudi since 2020. The rule banning non-Muslims is a direct rule from Allah in chapter 9 of the Quran, so don't expect this regulation to change anytime soon. Medina, Islam's second holiest city, is often thought to have the same rule. However, it is completely permissible for non-Muslims to enter the city. The rule is solely applicable to the holy mosque Masjid al-Nabawi. If you so desired to, you could come up to the gates themselves and get a clear glance of the second holiest site in Islam, which actually contains the tomb of the Prophet Muhammad himself. The area around the mosque is fenced off, and if you do attempt to enter, you may be subject to the same interrogation techniques on the road to Mecca, and a check of your ID could be necessary. The Norwegian archipelago of Svalbard is the opposite of somewhere you're not allowed to go. In fact, it's uniquely a completely visa-free zone. The Svalbard Treaty signed in 1920 grants dozens of nations worldwide, amongst them Russia, USA, China, India, Argentina, and more the right to move to and work in Svalbard if they desired to live in a barren, freezing wasteland. There is one place on the archipelago that is strictly off-limits to all of these people though, and that is the Doomsday Vault. Located on Svalbard's largest island of Spitsbergen, the idea for the vault originated 2 decades ago and is built deep inside a mountain to provide insulation against environmental hazards. The vault itself is the host to seeds across the globe. The project seeks to safeguard crop diversity and food security in response to the threat of increasingly hazardous climate change, or if mankind destroys the planet itself through nuclear warfare. The vault is thus off-limits for security reasons, with only researchers and scientists being granted occasional access for deposits and withdrawals. What do you think of this list? Do you think it's time some of these places opened up to more visitors? Or do you believe there's more places that should be made off-limits to the public? Do you know of any additional recent examples that we could append to this list? As always, comment in the comments section below, and like and subscribe for more content in the future.